In this video, we're going to learn how to put ser and estar in the past tense. But before we do, let's point out how far you've come. The words ser and estar are very much the mortar of the Spanish language. It's a lot of work to get these right, but once you master them, they'll quickly become second nature, and then your Spanish sentences are going to flow faster and faster. But one of the reasons people don't start out by teaching ser and estar is because they're particularly difficult to learn. Most verbs are a lot easier than this, and one of the reasons these verbs are so difficult is because they don't follow the same conjugation patterns that most verbs follow. What do I mean by patterns? Well, let's look at these conjugations that you've learned. I'm creating a chart here, but try to picture the scenes and the people in the scenes as I do this. So we have soy and estoy for the first person. For the third person singular, we have es and está. For the informal second person, we have eres and estás. For the third person plural, the pandas, we have son and están. And then for the first person plural, we have somos and estamos. So some of these words have similar endings. The first few are not normal, but pay attention particularly to your friend with the curly hair on the hovercraft. His words both end with s, eres and estás. And then for the pandas, their words always end with n, son and están. And then for your own group of tall and short friends who stamped on the stamps, you end with mos, in both ser and estar. The fact is that every verb conjugation for the plural third person, or the pandas, will always end with n in Spanish. And every verb conjugation for we will end in mos. And most verb conjugations for the informal second person, like you eres or you estás, will end with the letter s. So if you can associate mos with we, n with the pandas, and s with your friend who rides a hissing hovercraft, you've already memorized some of the most important patterns in Spanish. We're about to learn some past tenses. They're not that hard to learn because they actually do follow patterns perfectly. First, let's stay at the magic shop and learn the past tenses of estar. Remember that you were concerned about your friend who was tossing around these sharp magic wands. Well, there's a back room at this shop that's small and crowded, and it's full of sharp magic wands. Everybody's getting stabbed by these sharp wands, or at least poked by them, because it's so crowded and full of them. So remember the stress on the word stab. That will help you remember the most common past tense conjugation of estar, which is estaba. This means was, as in I was. And it also means was, as in he was, she was, or it was. This word is used for both yourself, the first person, and the store owner, the third person. You'll notice that this word, estaba, doesn't follow the patterns of the words that it's associated with in the present tense, estoy and está. But all the rest of the words in this scene will correspond to the endings of the words that they correspond to in the present tense. So, for example, to change this word to you were, we'll put an S at the end that represents your friend on the hissing hovercraft. This is estabas. So this is a lot like estás, but this time with a stress on stab. For the pandas, or they were, it'll also have a stress on stab, but you'll put an N at the end. So this is estaban. Maybe think stab pandas, estaban. And now what do you think is the word for were, as in we were? So that would be estábamos. Maybe like most of us stab the most. Estábamos. So as you can see, each of these words is simply estaba with a stress on stab, but then with the ending changed based on what person you're talking about. Let's practice this right now, still with these words showing, just to see if you can find the right word for the sentence. They were here. They estaban here. We were not here. We no estábamos here. You were at the party. You estabas at the party. Now for a formal you. You are near the park. Usted está near the park. We weren't here, but she was. We no estábamos here, but she lo estaba. Now let's learn the past tense of ser. We'll go back to this indoor carnival where we were lining up for the bouncy house. Now, once you go inside the bouncy house, which represents the past tense, you realize that it's leaking air. And so it's blowing air all over everyone who's in the bouncy house. So this represents the stressed syllable er for the word era. So here are the words. I was is era. He, she, or it was is also era. So just like in estar, the first person and the third person singular are the same word. This word, by the way, looks so different from all the other words that we learned in ser, like soy and somos. There are basically no letters in common. But if you can still remember that it's part of the ser carnival, this memory palace, you'll remember that it's still part of the same verb, just a very different form of the same verb, associated with this bouncy house. So we're just inside the bouncy house now instead of lining up for it. It's the past tense of the same verb. Now, what do you think the second person past tense is? It's you eras. They were is they eran for the pandas. And then we were is we éramos. So you would use these words like this. I was your friend is I era your friend. They were my friends is they eran my friends. What would we were the students be? So that's we éramos the students. That was the problem would be that era the problem. And then an informal you were a good student would be you eras a good student. With the words that we've learned today, you can make a lot of sentences in Spanish. You can do a lot of things with the present and past tenses of ser and estar. The problem is that they all have meanings that are very close to each other, but not quite. And you have to keep them straight in order to express your meaning accurately in Spanish. So a really important thing that I recommend doing is practicing getting out a piece of paper and drawing out your 4 scenes. So that's your first assignment. Get out a piece of paper and draw from memory all 4 scenes. The present tense of ser, the past tense of ser, the present tense of estar, and the past tense of estar. Make sure all the conjugations that you write out are correct. Then post the maps that you draw in the private community to show off to your fellow students. If you can do this accurately from memory, then go on to today's quiz.